Hello and welcome to Reggie'sTake.com podcast number 21. And yes, this means this podcast is now of legal drinking age. Woohoo! X-Men Apocalypse has hit theaters with mediocre reviews and a Rotten Tomatoes score of 48%. Did the critics get it right or wrong? My guest and I will give our thoughts on Apocalypse. Bryan Singer in a recent interview says he's ready to move on, that he needs some time away from the X-Men universe. What does this mean for Fox and their X-Men, and will it hurt the franchise? New information has come out about the next Thor movie, Ragnarok. If the latest news is correct, we could be spending some time on the planet Hulk. Dan Aykroyd says he's seen the new Ghostbusters movie and has nothing but high praise for it. We'll tell you what he had to say. And Disney executives has been shown a cut of Star Wars Rogue One, and according to reports, they're not happy with what they've seen. Joining me today is my guest and keeper of the comic book flame, James from the True Believers.
Hello.
Welcome. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm all right. So far, 2016 has been laden filled with superhero movies, all seeming to be battling each other at this point.
Yeah.
Another one we've seen now is Apocalypse. It's getting mediocre reviews. It's not getting blasted like Batman versus Superman, but it's not getting necessarily the high praise that Civil War has gotten. My personal opinion on the movie was I enjoyed it. Then again, I'm not as familiar with the X-Men universe in some regards as other people are.
Well, that's the beauty of the X-Men movies is from movie one, they have not followed the comics at all. Not at all. So, I mean, you don't need to know anything and go into these movies. In fact, half the time you don't even need to see the previous movie because they do a really bad job of like continuity. Like if you watch the entire series from beginning to end, there are continuity errors all over the place. Like it's like on the first movie, one of my favorites is I was watching the first movie and Charles Xavier is like, when I was 17 years old, I met the most amazing man named Magneto. And I'm like, no, because I saw First Class and you were like in your late 20s. So like right there, like right away. And then like, X-Men 2, you see Dr. Hank McCoy on like Charlie Rose or Larry King or something like that. It's just like a cameo. And then the next movie you meet Beast and he's all blue and furry. So like there is like there's a lot of bad continuity errors from day one. So it's okay.
Some of the critics' reactions to this movie have been interesting, and I have a few written down here. One of them says, I get it. Life is hard for mutants. We all get it. It's literally the only thing mutants ever seem to talk about. It's odd that the other superheroes seem to get to have some fun, but never the X-Men. Here we are 16 years later, and everyone involved is still sad. It feels repetitive.
Yeah, I actually read that review, and actually I kind of agree. Here's the deal. That's always been both the strength and the weakness of X-Men, both in the comics, the movies, and the cartoon. Tries to, the whole purpose of it is to be an allegory for oppressed people, be it people of color, people from another country, people who are gay, whatever, okay? But on the flip side of that, and this has always been a problem, you can have fun with Spider-Man and Iron Man, and it's like, yeah, they've got their dark stories, but they still have lives, and, there's still humor in all this. And then you read X-Men, and everything is doom and gloom, like, all the time, and, oh, no one loves us, and it's like, we get it. And, like, the best part about that, though, is, like, in the X-Men comics, this is how, like, X-Men, like, sort of doesn't, because it's so allegory heavy compared to the other ones, it almost doesn't jive too well with the other Marvels. When you read X-Men comics, it feels like the anti-mutant movement is a huge movement, like the anti-gay movement or the anti-civil rights movement. Like, it feels like it's a huge movement. And everywhere they go, someone's gonna, like, throw rocks at them or something, or there's protests. Then you read any of the other Marvel comics, and once in a while, somebody might mention mutants. Usually it's if there's a cameo from Wolverine or something. It's weird because, like, outside of that comic, no one cares about mutants at all. Like, no one cares. And so it is really weird.
I kind of like the movie. I know some people said strong start, weak ending. From my point of view, I didn't see where the weak ending was. Maybe some people were expecting more of a bigger battle. I'm not sure. I guess to a certain extent, it was a little bit of an anticlimactic ending.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as how they took care of Apocalypse himself, and it was more or less of Xavier kind of getting into his head and all this other stuff. but I kind of enjoyed the movie.
I would say that I liked the first half of the movie a lot, actually. Where it starts to kind of fall apart for me was the part with William Stryker. And I gotta say, I'm so sick of this character. He was a great character played by Brian Cox in X-Men 2. He dies in X-Men 2, but has somehow showed up in every prequel. He was in Wolverine Origins, which is the worst X-Men movie by far. A lot of people talk about X-Men 3, but they forget about the spinoff. This one is like way worse than X-Men 3. He was in Days of Future Past, and I gotta say, like, to be fair, it was like kind of cool. It was kind of a cool cameo to see Wolverine from the future in the 70s is having PTSD because he sees William Stryker, and honestly, that was kind of a cool moment. But I guess since there's been so many cameos of him, even that was kind of an eye roll at first. Like, it ended up having good payoff, but when it comes to him, I'm like, oh gosh, here comes Stryker. You know, there's like other characters out there, and the whole thing was just like out of nowhere. Basically, the whole thing was just to give us a fan service Hugh Jackman moment where he busts out of Weapon X. And to be fair, like that weird yellow gear that he was wearing, that's from the Weapon X comic from the 90s, where they kind of talk about his origin, which I was like, hey, that's cool. And my friend was like, what was up with that ugly yellow gear he was wearing? That was weird. And I was like, well, actually, that's from the Weapon X thing. And then he's like, oh, that's cool, I guess, but I didn't like it. And I was like, you know what? I didn't like Weapon X either. Like, I didn't like that comic, but you know, I did like the callback to the first one. Jean is like helping him take those probes off.
Oh yeah, he took
like
this out himself.
And they did it like exactly like on X-Men 1. Like that whole scene. And actually, I did like that a lot. Once it comes to like Apocalypse and his 4 horsemen, like there's a lot of buildup, and then they just like don't really do anything. Like there's a lot of CGI and stuff, but electromagnetism going on or something. But there really isn't a lot going on at the end, so it kind of dropped off for me. Like I said, the first half is really strong, and I really like the stuff with Magneto. And when his family gets killed and he's trying to live a normal life and all that. I really like that.
Kind of showed more of a humanistic side of him.
Yeah.
Almost made you care for that character. More so than they have in the past.
Yeah, that was really nice. That was really good. I also got to say I like the new cast a lot. I really liked the new Storm, Cyclops, Jean Grey, who I knew her from Game of Thrones.
Okay.
And Nightcrawler. All 4 of them I really liked.
Would you agree or disagree that the amount of people they had in this movie was overbloated as far as number of characters?
Well, that's...
Because it seemed like they had a huge amount of cast. I mean, not necessarily a well-known cast, but I mean, just as far as the number of characters involved in the entire movie.
That's kind of what, you know...
Or is that what you want to expect with an X-Men movie?
For X-Men, I'm cool with that. I get how a moviegoer would feel like the cast is overwhelming, but guess what? That's how it was with X-Men 1. It wasn't a huge cast. It's gotten bigger and bigger since. This is now technically the 6th X-Men movie, but it's actually more like the 9th X-Men movie if you count the 2 Wolverines and Deadpool movies.
Right.
So by this point, it's like, deal with it. All right? If that's what you're going to complain about, deal with it. I will say it was kind of weird that we're getting like origin stories for characters we already know. Because, I mean, we got origin stories for all 4 of those kids, plus origin stories for Angel. I'm going to get to Angel in a minute. I'll save that for later. I had some issues with that.
What about Jennifer Lawrence? The previews always made her seem like she was walking through her role.
Actually, she was good. Yeah.
And to me, after seeing the movie, she didn't really seem like that's what was the case. So I think the trailers really did her character
a misservice.
A misservice.
Most of what you see on film, or most of the audio that you see that you hear on film is actually done in a booth afterwards. Like they overdub it. And a lot of times with trailers, you'll hear a different dubbing, or you'll hear a different take. I've noticed that a lot, especially with trailers I watch a lot. Like, I'll hear a different take. Like, even with Civil War, that whole thing of where he says, I want to punch you in your perfect teeth, totally different take than what was in the final movie. And the final movie was more like just a funny joke. It was more lighthearted. So I think in the trailers, I'm thinking, it's probably an earlier take, obviously. They should have used a different one, because it really did make her sound like she didn't care. But then I see this version, and I really liked her in it. Like, I thought she was really good.
By the time you got to the end of the movie, and obviously, Magneto's helping them rebuild Xavier's castle or school or whatever it is you want to call it. It's a monstrosity of a building. And I know Days of Future Past kind of reset the X-Men universe, at least in the movie world. Is Magneto now kind of becoming more, not necessarily like he was in the original trilogy, or is he still has that tendency to be a loose cannon and go dark? Or do they even know where they're going with this?
I don't think they
him?
have any clue on where they're going. And I think one of the big issues this movie has, and you know what, and I do like this movie, one of the big issues this movie has is, I haven't heard anyone else touch upon this, and we haven't yet, is that Days of Future Past was really good. Not only was it really good, but I know it was a finale for the old cast with
Patrick Stewart,
Ian McKellen, Halle Berry.
Right.
We even get a cameo from James Marsden and Famke Janssen, and even Kelsey Grammer pops up at the end. I mean, they're just cameos, but
right.
I know it was like a farewell to them, but that movie really kind of should have probably been the finale. And I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to Star Trek the whole thing and do like a soft reboot. And I'm not really sure how well that's working out, because they still have, like, it sounded good on paper, but they still have some of the problems, and there's no way around it. They didn't go back far enough in time to like change the problems. They're still confined by the problems that were in the first one. And like, so I guess we're gonna see like the same characters go through the same thing. Like Wolverine's got his metal claws again and all this, and it's like it's weird.
So by my reckoning of what's happened in the movies, because with Wolverine he lost his metal claws. We saw him in the Days of Future Past, and now with this one he gets his metal claws passed.
By the way, speaking of, okay, I just said I love Days of Future Past, but I also earlier said how there's no continuity. How did he get, because his metal claws broke at the end of the Wolverine. How did he get him back on the third one? I already have to suspend my disbelief on how Professor X is alive again. Now he has his metal claws in the future. Like, yes, he had his bone claws in the past. This whole series is just full of continuity.
Well, what I was getting at, so are we going to then see him in his last Wolverine movie coming out next year with the metal claws?
We'd have to, yeah.
I'd almost say we'd have to.
Yeah.
Because if they come out and say, and show him only with bone claws, then there's a little bit of inconsistency between the movies.
Which I wouldn't put past them. There's always inconsistency between these movies.
But I guess I can also see where you could say Days of Future Past reset Wolverine as well, because if the Wolverine technically took place before Days of Future Past, and that reset his whole timeline, and he's the only one who knows.
Yeah, but he doesn't know, because if you remember,
he doesn't remember anything. Yeah.
He didn't wake up until decades later.
Right, because when he comes in and he sees Patrick Stewart, professor, he goes, shouldn't you be teaching history? What are you talking about? And then
that was actually neat, because he didn't so much wake up as
his memories came back.
Well, that was in the same, like, if you're looking at the same time, that was the same day in the scary Sentinel future.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he just like woke up in the same day, and the rest of it is just his mind and body catching up with them. And I thought that was actually kind of neat.
Now, have you ever seen the and this is getting away from Apocalypse, but have you seen the Bryan Singer's director's cut or the Rogue cut of that movie?
I still haven't.
I just watched that the other day before I went to see Apocalypse, and I actually kind of liked the Rogue cut.
Yeah. What happens? I know, like, she wasn't in the final movie.
She wasn't in the original that they released the theatrical version, but the girl that's doing the whole thing with Wolverine and sending him back.
Oh, Kitty Pryde.
Yeah, she gets injured to the point to where Professor and Magneto and, forgive me, I don't have the name, but the guy who does all the ice.
Iceman.
Yeah, they go back to...
Ice Guy.
Yeah, they end up sneaking back into the Xavier school to get what they need because Rogue is being held by the Sentinels there, and they go and rescue Rogue. Iceman gets killed, and they go back to where they're hiding out, where whatever is, and Rogue puts her hand and takes her power, and then takes over doing the thing.
Oh, wow.
With Wolverine, and that's how it continues on through the rest of the movie, and it's her.
Wow.
So the whole continuity, and it actually, to me, that movie was really no longer with credits. It was only 2 hours and 28 minutes long. So it was really no longer than what Apocalypse is. So I don't know why they didn't go with that cut in the first place, because a lot of fans were hoping to see Rogue, because everyone knew that she had filmed scenes.
Such a major character in the first movie.
That she had filmed scenes in that movie. So I kind of liked that, what they did with it. And to me, it almost made better sense to me that way than it did the original way.
Yeah, because she was such a major character in the movie. The Kitty Pryde thing, I'll tell you what that is. That was a reference for the fans, and I liked it. See, in the original Days of Future Past comic, Kitty Pryde is the one that goes back.
Right, and in the special features, they said they had to change it because from when they introduced that character in the movies, she wouldn't have technically been alive, so they couldn't send.
Yeah, it would have been impossible.
Yeah, they couldn't send her, and they came up with the idea, well, Wolverine's kind of been this thread through the entire thing, so they used to send his mind, his consciousness back.
Which, of course, there was still I used to love crack.com. I used to think they were great, but now it's just now all they do is whine, and there was one where they're like, way to take away this role from a great character, Kitty Pryde. And I'm like, yeah, but she wasn't alive in the 70s. You can't do it.
Right.
I mean, I know, we're just making it another freaking Wolverine movie. I get that, but I mean, come on. Find another way to complain. That would have been, I would like to see the Rogue version, because even though, I do like that they've got Kitty Pryde sending him back, because that's, a reference to the comics. Rogue was such a big character in the first movie. She pretty much dropped off.
And she really doesn't show up in the Rogue cut until about the last third of the movie.
Yeah. I really want to see that, actually. That sounds interesting.
And, of course, Apocalypse also kind of made a little bit of self-deprecating humor within the series. We were talking about that before we started.
Oh, yeah.
Where those 4 kids come out of the movie theater, and I thought it was cool. You see this movie marquee. It says Return of the Jedi, and they're talking about Star Wars. And, well, without the first one, you don't get the whole trilogy. The second one's always the best. Well, the third one's always seems to be the worst. If you didn't catch the joke, then you don't understand it.
It's because X-Men 3 sucks. X-Men 3 is also the one where Bryan Singer left.
Because he left to go do Superman Returns.
The funny part about that, though, is this one it's technically the 9th movie in the X-Men saga. It's the 10th movie in the X-Men, or the 6th movie in the actual X-Men series, but it's also the 3rd movie in the First Class trilogy, and it's also the worst one. So, good job, guys. Good job.
Well, wouldn't it have been just as funny? Apocalypse set in 1983. Superman 3, I believe, came out in 83.
Which makes it even weirder because Bryan Singer directed Superman Returns, which he meant as the new Superman 3.
So I think it would have been...
Superman Returns, while better than Superman 3...
Or 4.
Well, actually, if you say that 3 and 4 don't exist, then Superman 3 is the third in a trilogy. And it's the worst one. So, it's all over the place.
But if you think about it, he could have actually put Superman 3 in that marquee and done the same joke, and it still would have been funny.
Yeah.
And that also would have been a reference to him going back to leaving.
Actually, they probably should have done that.
Yeah. That probably would have. But the Star Wars thing was kind of cool.
I got to say, one of my favorite moments in the movie is when the kids, Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Nightcrawler all go out on the town, and they see the movie, they go to the mall, and I gotta say that should have been a lot longer than it was. That should have been just a really fun major part of the movie instead of just kind of full of a couple throwaway jokes, because it was really good, and I would have rather watched that than a bunch of weird stuff with William Stryker, honestly, because that really was the best part of the movie, and they should have kept that. That's really what...
Now,
that's what Marvel's all about, is that fun stuff like that.
Now, one of the coolest parts of Apocalypse, I thought, was the whole Quicksilver scene of him rescuing all the kids through the mansion as it was blowing up. Now, that was, I can't remember what the music was.
It was Sweet Dreams by Erasure.
That was a cool moment in the movie. I thought that was really, really fun to watch. I could see that part of it again.
Oh, speaking of weird music in that movie, I did Angel when he's getting drunk. He's listening to Four Horsemen by Metallica. Pizza, which was pretty good.
I didn't pick up
There
on
was
that.
another one. Like, there's a lot of, like, really funny music references. Okay, now to bitch about Angel. Really liked the actor who played him. And I actually really liked that cage fight scene between him and Nightcrawler. And I'm a sucker for crap like that. Like, ooh, it's an angel versus a demon, but the angel's the mean one and the demon's the nice one.
Now, before you get too far into what it is you're going to go into here.
Oh, it's a rant.
That's fine. In the comics, does his wings actually change from feather to metal like,
yes,
it did in the movie?
Yeah, that's actually a major... That's like one of the most well-known apocalypse stories.
Okay.
First off, Angel is not only a key X-Men, he's one of the original X-Men. He's one of the original 5. It was Cyclops, Jean Grey, or Marvel Girl, as she was called, Beast, Angel, and Iceman. Those were the original 5 X-Men. And in the comic, with Apocalypse in the late 80s, some characters like Damage or clip his wings, he can't fly. And Apocalypse repairs him by giving him metal wings, and now he goes by the name Archangel, and he, kind of goes crazy and evil. He does become a good guy later. He redeems himself, fights himself against Apocalypse. And I know, that was kind of Storm's role in this movie, but at the same time, it's Storm's a much better X-Men, but Angel's one of the original, and to just kill him off like that, I thought was, really lame. I didn't like that. And then, they kill him off, and he's still a bad guy at the end. I'm not the type that gets too worked up over, how they follow the comics, especially with X-Men, because they never do, and that's fine. But that one kind of irked me. And making things even weirder, is he the same Angel in X-Men 3? Because if he is, that makes no sense. Because the Angel in X-Men 3 would have been a lot younger. He probably would have been 5 years old in the 80s.
Yeah, true.
I don't know. I have issues with that. I think if anyone they should have killed would be Psylocke. But see, there again, Psylocke is an X-Men. That's the weirdest thing about how aside from Magneto, the other 4 horsemen were all X-Men. Storm, Angel, and Psylocke. Are we really out of bad guys? We can't come up with... I know you want to use Magneto, fine. I know you want to use Angel because of the whole Archangel thing, reference, fine. Psylocke, by the way, what a weird character. Do you know anything about that character?
About which character?
Psylocke, the Japanese girl.
No.
You're going to have fun with this. So most people are like, oh yeah, Psylocke's cool. She's a hot Asian chick. True. Well, sort of. In the comics originally, she was Betsy Braddock, a British superhero who's the twin sister to Captain Britain. And she's white. And here's where it gets weird, though. She has telepathic powers. She was more like a supporting character. She'd help out every now and then. And then somewhere in the mid-80s, she actually joined the X-Men. And then all of a sudden, they're fighting some ninja assassin. And during the battle, their minds switch bodies, and they've never gone back.
Okay.
Yeah, so she's a British chick living in a Japanese samurai girl's body.
Interesting.
And that's... You'd think that would be one of those stories where, after a couple issues, they go back. 20 years later, they're like, no, we're keeping it this way. All right, whatever. That's one character that I hope they never... That's one character that they should never do that storyline for a movie. Just make her Japanese and get it over with.
Yeah. Some of the other... criticisms of this movie are X-Men Apocalypse is the kind of weightless, soulless trifle of a bore that makes comic book superhero movies look bad and makes me not look forward to the next installment. Messier, heavier than Days of Future Past, this is not so much the next step in the X-Men evolution as a failed callback to past glories. And the last one is the latest entry in one of the more reliable comic book franchises around, this time disappointingly succumbing to an exhausting case of been there and done that.
Yeah, there was a lot of been there, done that with this movie. Like I said, that whole Stryker scene was just oh my gosh.
I mean, the Wolverine part was cool.
It was cool, but
now
I'm always down for a Wolverine cameo, but I think they could have written it in better.
Now, I'm assuming you stayed and saw the post-credit scene, right?
Yeah.
Can you explain that to me?
I will. And what's funny is when I watched it, I didn't get it. I was like, I stayed for this. Wow, they're looking for Wolverine. I know. But then, it dawned on me later. I was like, oh, crap. Essex is called, the Essex Corporation or something.
Uh-huh.
Well, that literally took me till the next day to get. And then I was like, oh, well, I guess that's kind of neat. That is Nathaniel Essex, a.k.a. Mr. Sinister. He appeared in the late 80s. He is a scientist obsessed with genetics from the late 1800s, and he's basically produced a formula to make himself immortal, and he's trying to produce through eugenics and gene splicing, he's trying to create the ultimate mutants to be his slaves. That sounds a little bit like Apocalypse. Well, that's because it kind of is almost the exact same thing. But I think Mr. Sinister is actually a way cooler villain than Apocalypse.
So, are they setting up the next Wolverine movie or something else?
I'm hoping it's just a Wolverine one. I'm hoping, because like the next Wolverine movie has to have a villain. We've done Silver Samurai, and we've done just about everyone else. We've already done the Hellfire Club and killed them all. We've done even Emma Frost, apparently. We've done Magneto to death. And you can't do Magneto in a Wolverine movie.
No.
Because, like, he would kill Wolverine immediately.
Yeah.
He's totally useless against him. So, like, I'm really hoping, like, the villain is just...
Because I seriously doubt they're setting up something to do in the Deadpool franchise, because even though they're considering Deadpool in the X-Men universe, but...
Deadpool, they need to just kind of keep Deadpool what
separate.
It's doing. Yeah. I would say the smart move would be to make this... for the next Wolverine movie, make Mr. Sinister the villain rather than wait for the next X-Men movie, because I gotta be honest with you, after the Wolverine movie, I'm really hoping that Disney just spends $1 billion to buy, because like Hugh Jackman's gonna be done, so I'm hoping Disney, and so's like half the cast from these old ones.
Well, the Jennifer Lawrence and James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender, I guess, technically have signed newer contracts. But the way the contract reads, if one decides not to return, the other two do not have to come back either.
Okay.
So basically, if all three are on board to return, then that's great. But if one says, no, I'm not returning, then the other two can say, that person's not coming back, then neither am I. And they can't be held to what they've signed, I guess, is from what I understand. So
I'm really hoping that after this Wolverine movie, they're just done.
Or at least they need to take a good break.
Well, you know, I'd be fine if Disney, they spent $1 billion for Star Wars. They can spend $500 million.
Technically, they spent
X-Men.
$4 billion for Star Wars.
Was it $4 billion?
$4 billion.
They can spend $1 billion on X-Men because they have that kind of money now.
And
you know what? Buy it from Fox, then just sit on it. It can be phase 5 or 6, 10 years down the road.
A little something else, but I guess Bryan Singer actually had a cameo in this movie.
Did he?
Yes.
What was it?
It was in the scene where Wolverine has escaped and he's going around killing all the guards.
Oh, really? Is he one of the people that gets killed?
Yes. Yeah. It says here, he talked about it in an interview here. He says, I have a cameo in it. You can't tell. I'm the guy firing the machine gun, screaming when the camera flies by me. When I look at it, I couldn't recognize myself, so I knew no one else could. But it was a thrill to get killed by Wolverine. I can now say that it's one of my many things I can put on my resume.
That's pretty funny.
Now, since we're talking about Bryan Singer, he did an interview with the Los Angeles Times about his future with the X-Men franchise. And it says here, he goes, I recently met Danny Boyle. He and I have known each other for many years, but never met. He was prepping Steve Jobs at the time, and I was doing this, and he said, are you going to do X-Men forever? And I didn't actually say no. The reality is, even though I'm very desperate to jump to something completely different, I spent so many years in this universe, and I love this cast and the characters so much, I don't see myself abandoning them forever. Perhaps as a consultant or as a producer, even as a director, I could see myself returning to it in the future. Just right now, once this is done, I'd like to do something really different.
One thing that's easy for people to forget is that X-Men 2 was such a good movie.
Right.
And I know it's been a long time ago, but you look at, Bryan Singer has done 4 X-Men movies now. Two of them
you say were really good.
Well, 2 of them are the best X-Men movies. Not only are they the best X-Men movies, they're great movies. X-Men 2 and
Days of Future Past.
Days of Future Past. And both of them do one thing that most of the Marvel movies don't get right. They did get it right with Civil War, and they sort of did with Winter Soldier. But in X-Men 2 and Days of Future Past, there's really not a big showdown. I mean, a little bit in Days of Future Past.
But a little bit.
I mean, there's fight scenes. But
right.
Like, I mean, you know, you've got in X-Men 2, you've got Wolverine fighting Lady Deathstrike, and you've got brainwashed Cyclops fighting Jean Grey. But those are action scenes building up to the climax. Days of Future Past, I know Magneto comes in and like turns the Sentinels on, but like still, that's leading up to the climax. The big conflict at the end is resolved by Professor X pleading with Mystique, who's more or less the antagonist of the film, not to kill that man. And then, of course, you got Sentinels. I guess there is sort of a showdown, but it's different, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's different. And X-Men 2 is the same way. Like, you know, Wolverine could have clawed Brian Cox to death, but he didn't. I mean, Brian Cox still dies.
He just left him chained to the tree and let the floodwaters kill him.
I mean, he was chained by Magneto, but I don't think Wolverine realized that the whole place was going to flood when they get out of there. Like, I think he figured... Well, I think they knew, but I don't know. It doesn't really matter. Like, he still had a chance to get out.
Keeping it in the superhero theme world here, there's been the recent news on Thor Ragnarok. And I guess if all these stories are true, which it sounds like they are, Ragnarok will have the Planet Hulk element involved in it, operating as a kind of a mashup with the Ragnarok story. Thor ends up on the Planet Hulk, and Thor is involved in some gladiator games run by Jeff Goldblum's character of Grandmaster. Hulk appearance in this portion of the film will see him rocking one of the shoulder armor as seen in the comics.
It sounds like fun.
I think this is their Marvel's way of giving kind of a Hulk a little bit more of a bigger role, kind of like everyone kind of considered Civil War a little bit more of a kind of a pseudo fourth Iron Man movie as well, since there's a whole big issue there with Universal about trying to do another Hulk movie.
Yeah.
So it's kind of their way of giving him a little bit more screen time for the fans. It sounds like it could be a fun movie.
You know, my familiarity with Planet Hulk is, I got the basic storyline. I've never read it. I tried watching the movie, but I was like, this is kind of boring, so I turned it off. Ragnarok, I don't actually know anything about the Ragnarok comic, but I do know plenty about the Ragnarok mythology of, like, real myths. So, like, I think this is going to be pretty cool. And we've got Cate Blanchett as Hela. Hela is the queen of the dead in the realm of Niflheim, which is pretty exciting.
It seems like they're getting some pretty big actors to show up in this.
Well, isn't somebody
else I think is involved in this, and I don't remember who it is right off the top of my
somebody's
head.
going to play Scourge the Executioner, and I forget who. It's somebody pretty good. Oh man, what is his name? The guy who played Bones in Star Trek.
Carl Urban.
Carl Urban.
That's right.
Have you ever seen the new Dredd movie?
I have not.
It's good. He's pretty cool. Like, that is a good movie. Like, you're not going to grow as a person from watching it, but it's like a really good action movie. He is
They seem to really be kind of lining up an all-star cast for the third Thor movie.
Well, if Scourge the Executioner is in it, then that means that Amora the Enchantress is going to be in it. She's one of my favorite Thor villains. Scourge the Executioner is the Enchantress's baby, basically her manslave. I don't know. Like, I mean, it's like a lot of hot sexual tension between those two characters. And honestly, like, in the comics, Loki, because of Tom Hiddleston, Loki has become the best villain almost ever. But in the comics, I gotta say, like, I don't really like Loki in the comics. Like, I still like him, but I don't like him as much. Like, they try to... In the comics, he's, like, way too evil. Whereas in the movies, he actually is the god of mischief, you know? Like, his title says. I still like him in the comics, but I gotta say, like, he's actually my second favorite villain in the comics. The Enchantress is by far my favorite Thor villain. She's basically, I think she's got the same powers as Loki, which is like magic or whatever, but her big thing is she constantly wants to bone Thor. That's pretty much it, and she'll do anything it takes to get a hold of his hammer, if you know what I'm saying. So, like, that's pretty much it. It's awesome. But in the comics, she and Baron Zemo started the Axis of Evil, which was one of the first supervillain groups to fight the Avengers. The Axis of Evil consisted of Baron Zemo, the Enchantress, the Executioner, and a bunch of boring Iron Man villains that no one remembers. But that's pretty much it. Like the Melter and all this. Like, seriously, his name was the Melter, and he melts things. It's like, wow. Yeah. Like, Iron Man villains kind of suck.
Not very creative.
No.
We've all seen the trailers for the two trailers they released for the Ghostbusters movie coming out later this year. Mm-hmm. You and I have both stated already in previous podcast, from the looks of the trailer, we're not too enthused with it.
It doesn't look too...
Because it looks more like a reboot. A remake is what it what it looks like. But Dan Aykroyd, who played Stance in the first two Ghostbuster movies, recently saw Paul Feig's Ghostbuster movie, and he was quite happy with it, supposedly, because he's actually put out a statement saying, as an originator of the original, I saw the test screening of the new movie. Apart from brilliant, genuine performances from the cast, both female and male, it has more laughs, more scares than the first two, plus Bill Murray is in it. As one of millions of man fans and Ray Stantz, I am paying to see that and bringing all my friends to it.
Well, I will say this. The cast includes a lot of really good comedians. Kristen Wiig, Melissa McCarthy, and Kate Meccan.
Yeah.
What is her name?
How you pronounce her name. Plus, it also
They're all really funny. And
plus, it has Thor himself in it.
Yeah. And
so, I mean, I don't think cast-wise is the problem. It just looks like just an outright remake.
If it's funny, it's funny. But I still feel like a remake was a cheap way to go. They really could have found a better... I'll have to wait and see. But I feel like instead of doing a remake, comedy writing nowadays, it's not just comedies. Like, I mean...
And in the original Ghostbusters, the jokes weren't just blatantly out there. They were more of a subtle, in my opinion, subtle remarks and conversation between the characters that made the whole movie funny and reactions to what was going on, or quick little one-liners. And nowadays, the comedy is so different that...
Well, comedy movies aren't very... I'm down for like some wacky jokes, but comedies a lot of times aren't very well written. Now, Deadpool was surprisingly well written, right. But like as far as like story wise and like plots are usually pretty paint by numbers, and that's what I'm afraid this is gonna be. It's gonna be just a remake of the first one, and it's like they could have really done something really like fun and original here, where they could have done this thing about these. They could have done this story where it's been 30 years since the last ghost attack.
These girls go to the last three still around to get advice.
There haven't been any. Well, like like I was thinking, like it's been 30 years. There hasn't been a ghost sighting in 30 years. So people either think, A, they pretty much, when they killed Dozer, they eliminated the portal between this world and the next, and ghosts can no longer exist in this world. Or B, people believe this camp where the Ghostbusters faked the whole thing.
Right.
And there were never any ghosts. So, like, then you have this idea, well, like, even though we know they didn't fake it, but it's like, well, like, maybe they faked it. And that can go along with, these crappy reality shows where these guys put on the
costume and
you know what I'm talking about, where they're like, this place is haunted and we've got night vision cameras and what was that? No, what was that?
I know what you're
and there's
about.
Never anything, and like this could be like a real take on that, where like that's how these girls start, and then they're like, oh wait, no crap, there's like real ghosts, and then they have to like delve into it, and then they like look into this old business and they're like, we got to buy this and like start it and
restart it back up.
That's your movie.
And they got cameos from the original three actors who are still around, but from what I understand, they're not even playing the same characters. And if you're going to put cameos who are still around from the first two, I want to see them as their old characters again. I don't want to see them as some God knows what coming in and just for a quick laugh. I want to see them there for a reason, not just because you can put them in there. I mean, cameos are great and can kind of be cool and nostalgic, but let's make it at least worth something. And I also wonder how much of this statement is more or less trying to give a bolster to the movie to help keep the criticism down a little bit.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, this movie, here's the deal. First off, this movie had the issue, and it was going to have this issue. When it was announced, the initial wave is like angry. And the initial wave is like angry because it's an all-female cast. Oh, women, blah, blah. And that was real. You got to admit that. Like, that was real. So that was the first wave. All these people were like, oh, you got to be PC, a bunch of social justice warriors. Blah, blah, blah. So then you do that. So then once that wave is done, then there's the wave of... Then after that, then it's like, okay, let's see how this movie looks. You see the trailers, and it's like, this doesn't look very good. Well, then comes the second wave of the actual social justice warriors who are like, anyone who says this movie looks bad is sexist, and it's like only half the people that say it looks bad are sexist. The other half just think it looks bad. So it's like the constant wave of like two different types of crazy just going at it, and it's like, all right, I don't think this movie looks great. I'm gonna give it a shot because I like the cast. I love Ghostbusters. I'll give it a shot, but like let's tone down the crazy.
I'd also be curious to see what kind of score the critics give it too.
Yeah.
because, the critics will start, like they always do, they'll be able to release their opinions about it a week or two before the movie actually hits theaters because they will have already had the chance to see it. So, I mean, will it get a Batman versus Superman type of score, or will it get
I don't think so.
Ooh, we love this movie, this is great, this is what we've all been expecting, which I would find that highly doubtful. But
I think the Batman versus Superman score is even more like Batman versus Superman's, when you get past the fun action, and the action was fun, when you get past that, there's something really fundamentally wrong with them. Something that you can't quite put your finger on, but it's like something about this is messed. It's the same with Man of Steel.
I almost say Ghostbusters, either you're going to love it or you're going to hate it.
We'll see. We'll see.
That's just from my initial
I will
thinking.
say, though, like, honestly, I think with Apocalypse, I think, like, it sucks that it has, like, a 50%, but I think most of the critics that I read have been pretty on par with how I feel about it. It's, like, strong beginning, kind of tapers off at the end, like, weak villain. That goes with the strong beginning, weak end, where really menacing and scary.
And mysterious.
And then, like, it's like, okay, what's he gonna do? What's he gonna... And then it's like, well, he kidnaps Xavier and doesn't do anything. I mean, what is he doing? Like, I don't know. I will say, we'll go back to this other. I wanted to say this about X-Men, and I forgot to. Apocalypse is a character that when the X-Men movies came out, I never in a million years would have thought I'd see Apocalypse in a movie. Never. Because he was too weird. And, those early X-Men movies had, they really downplayed all the weird. To the point where, like, they weren't even wearing fun costumes anymore. They were all wearing these black leather uniforms, which actually looked pretty cool. There were no aliens, of course.
They were trying to ground it a little bit.
Yeah, they were. After Days of Future Past, when you start bringing in time-traveling robots, it's like, well, I guess you can do that. And I mean, I still hold to it that Thor is the one, talked about this a lot of times, Thor is the one that said, okay, you can pretty much do anything you want now. But I will say, even though like 10 years ago, I never would have imagined putting Apocalypse in a movie, I also think, had they made this movie 10 years ago, it would have been awesome.
Really?
I think so. Just because part of the problem with this movie is just we've seen so many superhero movies now that this one it's not a bad movie, but it just doesn't grab your attention the way the others. It's just not up to the par of some of the others.
Let's face it, in the last 4 months, we've gotten 4 major superhero movies.
Yeah.
I mean, Deadpool, Batman vs. Superman, Civil War, and now Apocalypse.
Deadpool is considered, and I mean, you're not wrong, but it's hard for me to believe that Deadpool is considered a major superhero movie. Like, isn't that crazy? Because he's such a goofy character. But yeah, it's crazy.
When was the last time we had that many superhero movies in that short amount of time? And all from basically, 2 from the same studio, but, it just seems like a lot really quick. Now, and there's really no break, because now we get Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles pretty quick, if not already out by the time this podcast is posted, and then of course you still have Doctor Strange coming later this year as well. So there's just a lot.
That looks good.
There's a lot going on this year. Star Wars Rogue One, first standalone Star Wars movie not connected to a trilogy.
How crazy is that, by the way, that we're having a Star Wars movie that isn't
connected to
Star Wars?
Yeah,
like it's part of the Star Wars universe now.
Yeah,
that's so weird.
Some interesting news has come out about this here recently too. First cut of Rogue One was recently shown to Disney executives, and the bosses at Disney were not fully satisfied with the first cut from director Garth Edwards. Now, Edwards has said when he first got the gig that because they were doing about the battle of how the rebels acquired plans to the Death Star to blow it up, in episode 4, that there is the word war in Star Wars, and he was always wanted to explore the idea of doing kind of more of a realistic war type movie in the Star Wars universe, which I thought was kind of a cool idea. But the bosses at Disney have now ordered reshoots to take place in July, and Disney is not taking a back seat in this and are demanding changes. The problem Disney currently has with Rogue One is tonally. They're not saying that the movie is a disaster or bad, but it's not in line with what Disney wants the movie to be. This is interesting, and from my point of view at least. The movie has not been tested for audiences yet, but Rogue One's first cut is being described as having the feel of a war movie, which is what Garth Edwards said he was wanting to do in the first place.
That sounds really good. Is Disney going to screw this up?
I don't know. I think what they're looking for is that feel you get with, say, A New Hope.
You know what? For a spin-off, I feel like do whatever you want. You know?
Star Wars Rogue One is, quote, has more of a feel of a war movie, and it's really good. And it connects with audiences and they love it, so be it.
Yeah.
I know they're trying to bring this in line. I think what they're trying to do is they're wanting to make it more feel like what A New Hope kind of has that feel of.
I think they're trying to make it feel more like
leading into New Hope, and they want that feel and not so dark. But then again, if you look at the first two trilogies done, if you look at the original trilogy, 4, 5, and 6, the quote best movie of those three is the darker of those three, Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
If you look at the prequels, the darker of those three movies is really kind of considered the best of the prequels, Revenge of the Sith. It seems like dark works in Star Wars, and that the fans seem to
the last movie was really dark too.
To a point, yes. But it also had that little bit of the New Hope feel. So it had that little bit of dark, but it still had a little bit of that kind of Return of the Jedi, New Hope type of lightness to it at the same time. You know, I don't have a problem with this movie if it is, quote, a dark war type movie. I don't have a problem with it, especially since Darth Vader is supposed to have somewhat of a decent part in this, and supposedly it's supposed to be, you know, you see him being a badass, then hey, let him be a badass. I mean, who cares?
I'll tell you what, as long as they put in some battle droids and some guns, I really want to see whatever happened to Trade Federation guys. I mean, they were fantastic. If we could get a cameo from Watto, I mean, I would just be thrilled. That's what we need.
But to me, this
sarcasm.
I get it. But to me, this whole thing of Disney demanding reshoots, you know, Disney's been about hiring these directors because they want these directors to put their spin and their touch on Star Wars, make it their own, you know, within the Star Wars universe. But at the same time, this tells me that they kind of are also going back on that a little bit if they're demanding him to do reshoots for changes in tone of the movie.
I'll tell you what it is, and you know what it is. Star Wars is a toy cash cow,
towards kids.
Disney is a toy cash cow. And if this movie is a war movie aimed more towards adults, there's going to be less toys. And that's not what Disney, or really, let's be honest, Star Wars is about.
Right.
Like, that's really what it is. It kind of irks me, but at the same time, it's like, well, I mean, these are kids' movies.
Well,
like, they're about the toys.
But at the same time,
it's one big commercial.
But at the same time, even if this is, quote, a Star Wars type war movie, the worst it's going to get is PG-13.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, you're not going to see the blood. You're not going to see the guts like a normal war. You're not going to get a Saving Private Ryan type of war movie. No matter how much you may wanted to try, people would not buy that. I wouldn't even buy that. But if you want to make it more of a realistic type of what the rebels fought against Empire, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
I don't mind that. So to me, Disney should be judging this. Is the movie good? Is the story good? Is it a good watch? And will people respond to it? If all those meet their criteria, then why force a change? Because to me, you start sticking their nose into it. Only thing I see with this is Fox and Fantastic Four. And I don't think Disney wants to have that issue on their first standalone movie. That's my opinion. Now, they have released a comment about it saying the filmmaking team and the studios always anticipate additional shooting and second unit work to make the film the absolute best it can be. And the actors were aware there would be additional shooting. Coming off The Force Awakens, there was an incredibly high bar for this movie, and we have a responsibility to the franchise and the fans to deliver the best possible movie we can. That's all fine and dandy, but to me, this just means they're trying to make it sound it's not as bad as it really is.
Yeah, I mean,
whatever
those guys are.
Those are spin doctors.
They're PR. Yeah. PR. Those PR guys they get paid big bucks to write that little bit of happy.
Oh, appease the fans. Oh, it's not that bad. You know, we're just doing some reshoots. I just don't know. I kind of been looking forward to Rogue One because I've always gotten the impression that it was going to be kind of a war type movie, and I've been looking forward to kind of something like that because you're not really supposed to see any Jedi or anything like that, and closer you're going to come to any sort of that, it was supposed to be Darth Vader. So I was cool with that, you know, and I was really looking forward to seeing, you know, a really kind of a serious type Star Wars movie. I think it'd be fun to watch, and if the storyline's good, then great.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm got too much high expectations for it. I don't know.
You know, I'm just hoping one of those characters, one of the main characters, decides at one point has to do some private investigation, so he stops at a 50s style diner and talks to the cook with 6 arms. That's all I'm asking for in this movie.
You're going to continue.
That's not so much to ask.
You're just full of prequel jokes today, aren't you?
I just the other day I was like, you know what? I'm going to watch one of these prequels, and then I was like, nah, I guess I'll watch Revenge of the Sith. It's been 5 years since I've seen that movie. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't watch it very often. Like, that's the best movie of the prequels. That movie's got some bad dialogue, like some horrible dialogue. It does kind of suck you in eventually because, like, the the action is good and the story's pretty good and like it's Star Wars. But like there's just some, like everyone is walking around going like, oh, Anakin, I know you've been stressed out lately. I know you've been under stress lately. Oh, Anakin's been under a lot of stress lately. And then it's like, oh my God, every character says that. Like towards the end of the movie, after he kills the younglings, he goes back to Padme's, doesn't tell her about it. And he's like, I have to go to the Mustafar region for some reason. Then he flies away and R2-D2 beeps something and C-3PO goes, well, R2, he has been under a lot of stress lately. And I'm like, oh my God, shut up. Jeez Louise. Oh my God. And like Yoda's like, under stress you are. And I'm like, oh my God. It just goes on and on and on. Oh, like that whole scene in the elevator with the Roger guys and they cut him up. And then, like, that whole scene is pretty weak, and then Anakin jumps back in, and Obi-Wan's about to stab him, but then he's like, he doesn't, and he goes, oh, it's you. It's like, well, there's some other things, like, only a Sith speaks in absolutes. Okay, only a Sith does that. Okay. God. Oh, and then my favorite line, though, is, hold me as you did by the lake on Naboo. Oh, wait, there's more. Hold on. And then there's, you're so beautiful. You love me because of my beauty? No, I love you because of something. And then she goes, then love has blinded you. And it's, like, pretty bad. But then, like, there's lightsabers, so you get over it.
Well, that's one of the longest lightsaber battles you'll ever see.
It's pretty good, yeah.
So
it's pretty good. It reminds me of, like, Metroid Prime or something when they're jumping on the platforms over the lava. It's like, this is pretty cool.
Any final thoughts on Apocalypse or anything we've talked about today?
I don't know. I know. See, we're going to do a podcast on my show about the Apocalypse character. We're gonna have to do it on a later date, though. Funny story. I got the comic book ready to send to Reggie, and I was like, here you go. This is what we'll be working on. And I forgot to hit send. So I can't bring it up on my phone because I can't bring up the email. But yes, always hit send before you leave.
What would you give Apocalypse on the score grade-wise?
Oh, probably a C+, maybe a B-. I liked it. I just think it was a little weak. I'd give it a higher score than Batman vs. Superman. But I do think it's time to retire the series, though. As much as I like this new cast that they brought in, which is kind of a shame, I do think it's time to just kind of retire the series, just let it go. And
assuming Fox moves forward and goes ahead and does another X-Men movie, which you would have to assume, considering they're also considering still doing another Fantastic Four movie, which I don't know why, but that's another discussion. And Bryan Singer decides not to return to the director's chair. Is that going to put more pressure on Fox to even have a better movie?
I don't know.
Because we know what happened the last time Bryan Singer didn't do an X-Men movie. We got Last Stand.
Yeah.
Now, granted, someone else did First Class, but Bryan Singer was involved with
that
it
was
as an executive.
Well, that was Matthew Vaughn. There's actually a little bit of history behind that. Matthew Vaughn, who's a really good director, was supposed to do X-Men 3, but he had a death in the family. It just happened right around the time they were starting, so he had to drop out. So then they bring in Brett Ratner. Matthew Vaughn has said that he's since stated that he wished that he could have somehow talked them into a delay and kept working on it because he hated X-Men 3 so much, like after he saw it. And Matthew Vaughn's actually really good. And by the way, the big problems with Apocalypse, I don't blame on... would certainly don't blame on the cast because they were awesome, and I don't blame on Bryan Singer either. The biggest problems with this movie, I think, is the scriptwriter. Happens to be the same scriptwriter from the old Fantastic Four movies and X-Men 3, so there you go. He's the head writer on this one. You know, I think it was actually a pretty decent movie, but I think this is the movie where it's like, okay, it's time to quit. I don't think there's anywhere logically for them to go. Like, even with the soft reboot of going back in time, it's just not really going to work. I think it's time to put X-Men to rest for about 10 years and then do a real reboot. And see what happens. You know, this is a different time, too. Like, part of what made X-Men 2 resonate so well was, and that movie had a very obvious gay rights, I would say overtone, not undertone, but an overtone to it. They were an allegory for gays. And, you know, back then, that movie came out in, what, 2002? 2003. And that was around the time, you think about the type of country we were in back then, George Bush was trying to get Congress and the Supreme Court to make an amendment for marriage being between man and a woman. And I'm not trying to get political here, but I am saying when that movie came out and had that statement, it was in a very, very different time than it is now. Now, of course, we've got other things going on. We've got the transgenders all of a sudden aren't allowed in bathrooms for some reason anymore.
Yes, the porta pots outside.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. So I guess there's still
there's
problems. You can still,
there's always issues in the world that
there's always going to be an allegory. I was about to say, like, where would they go? And then I was like, well, right there. Like, that's where they would go. Like, the next X-Men, Nightcrawler can't go in the bathroom.
Or Raven either, because, she can transform herself into anybody, so.
Oh, yeah.
So,
that's true.
There you go.
That's true. The other thing, though, is, like, I do think that they need to take a break. I'm hoping Disney buys them eventually.
I'm going to guess as much as you and I would love that to happen, I don't see that happening.
Well, there is one thing. Marvel is cannibalizing all of their Fox-owned stuff.
Well, I know they killed off their Fantastic Four comics when
they killed off Fantastic Four comics. They killed Wolverine in the comics 2 years ago and haven't brought him back. And they're keeping their comic sales down, but also they've got a stranglehold on like merchandise for these characters. Now, I'm still seeing a lot of Deadpool merchandise, so I don't really know how that works, but I know when Days of Future Past came out, they had a really cool Marvel Select action figure for Mystique in the Oval Office that they canceled. And I was like, why did they cancel that? It was based on the...
Basically, Disney's trying to make it very hard
based on the Jennifer Lawrence. But yes,
they're making it very hard for Fox to maintain
they're playing dirty.
To maintain those characters.
Yeah, they're playing dirty. I think with Deadpool, they're like, whatever, we don't really want that anyway because it's too R-rated. And Disney's not R-rated.
If Disney would have had Deadpool rights, that movie would not have been the same.
No.
Because Disney would never release it in that current
I don't
form.
think they're interested in anyway because like they're pretty keen on not doing R-rated movies.
Yeah, I don't see them would have been doing that anyway.
They've been really they've been cannibalizing themselves basically and playing dirty to get...
Trying to get some of those characters back.
Yeah, X-Men and Fantastic Four. It's actually, that might be what I'll do on my next podcast instead of stupid Apocalypse. I do want to talk about the creation of Apocalypse, but I think that would actually be more interesting. That might be what I do on the next one, is talk about how Disney is like playing hardball with Fantastic Four.
Would be an interesting topic too.
There's a lot of research to do on that. Like it's pretty fascinating.
I would give Apocalypse at least a solid B in my book.
Solid B, yeah. I'm thinking probably a B minus. It's X-Men, and here's the deal. Even like, and this is nowhere near the weakest X-Men movie, but even like the weaker ones, they're kind of like James Bond. It's like, yeah, it's you might see a little weaker one, but then the next one's going to be amazing. I mean, that's kind of how I feel with X-Men. It's kind of the same way. Like, like I said, I really like the cast. I wish they would have done something a little different with Angel. That's the only thing I gotta say. Normally, I don't get like this when they do this in movies, but for some reason, killing off Angel really kind of like made me mad. I was like, come on. I kind of knew they were going to do it though, because they kind of did that in the old 90s cartoon. Like, I don't think they killed him off, but they never redeemed him. Like, he was more or less a bad guy from the beginning.
I think we've pretty much covered everything. I'm looking at something unique to discuss in my next podcast that I've sent you links on. Something we've not really discussed, and I was going to try and touch on it in this podcast, but as we talked before, I'm going to reserve it for something to talk about on the next one, at least. It's something different, unique. I can guarantee you what we're going to talk about, the material itself sucks, but it's just, there's a lot of interesting things about it that just make you kind of go, and I didn't even know this thing existed anyway in the first place, and I think there's some interesting ways and places we can go and talk about this. So, especially with all the superhero, the way superhero movies seem to be in the universe right now and Hollywood, it's just something unique. And if you're a Mystery Science Theater nut, then this will also may bring back some memories if you've possibly seen it, because it did air in the Mystery Science 3000. So, if you know what it is, by all means, want to take a guess, you can always message me on Twitter at Reggie's Take. I think that pretty much covers it all. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I think so.
With that, you can catch any of James's podcast on his Facebook page or YouTube page. You can find his links on my website, reggiestake.com. As I said before, you can follow me at reggiestake.com. I also have a Facebook page, and you can also just go to reggiestake.com or my YouTube page. If you haven't seen Apocalypse, go see it. Make your own judgment for yourself. Turtles are out. Go see that. Not as bad as some people may say. At least the first one wasn't, and the second one doesn't look really that bad either. But anyway, we will be talking movies and superheroes down the road. We'll talk at you later.